and terminal. So an era with very few massive machines locked away in the computer center, specialists engaging with them, and IT being very much on its own. Then in 1981 we saw the introduction of the IBM PC. Microsoft came up with the operating system, and we saw a significant shift in the market by around the mid-1980s as organizations moved away from the mainframe terminal environment to a world shaped by PCs, client-server computing, local area network, wide area network, early internet, etc. Then by around 2007, IDC saw significant shifts in the market, and I think it's important to point out that as a research company, our core business is tracking markets, forecasting markets. So it's not just a case of a couple of bright colleagues of mine sitting in a room coming up with new buzzwords, but actually looking very closely at the market and how these markets evolve. And what we saw was that in 4 areas, the market was outstripping the overall IT growth, which is globally low single digits at around 3.8%. We saw significant growth in 4 areas, so cloud, mobility, big data, and social. Now, if we look at mobility, for example, it got mentioned earlier today, the smartphone and tablet market this year will be worth around $485 billion, accounting for 40% of all IT growth. Social business, again, the first and the second platform, a lot of the innovation came from the enterprise. The third platform will be all around consumer-driven innovation, and we see that social enterprise applications growing at around 40%. Clouds, including virtualization, etc., a $100 billion business today, growing to $200 billion by 2018. And big data and analytics, obviously data being one of the key currencies of the third platform. But I think it's also important to point out that it's not just a case of specific technologies changing, but that enterprises are truly taking these third platform elements like cloud and mobility and big data and social and building these vertical solutions on top of the third platform. So things like smart government, smart health, smart cities, etc., all being built with third platform technologies. The other key point that I'd like to touch on a little bit is that each transition leads to very specific winners and losers. We saw that from the first to the second platform. Think of companies like DEC, Wang, etc., that didn't make that transition. And also from the second to the third platform. Look at BlackBerry, look at Nokia on the device side. It can happen very quickly. Nokia had a 40% market share in 2005. So it's important to get these transitions right. And another key point, and it got touched on earlier today as well, is whereas the innovation in the first and the second platform was very much driven out of the US and Europe, the third platform innovation will also come from what we consider emerging economies today. Think of the success of China, especially in terms of SP infrastructure, but increasingly in terms of the enterprise and other emerging economies. And the final point around the third platform is the fact that the employee is changing as well. You know, we've all heard about Generation Y, etc. We see a significant shift in terms of this new wave of workers entering the organization, wanting to work whenever they want with their own device, using their own social platform to do that. So a significant shift. And final comment on this slide, as we said earlier, as organizations adopt the third platform technologies to build these vertical solutions, we see companies changing their very nature. And the best quote to me to illustrate this is by Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO at GE, who said, "You go to bed one day being a manufacturing company, and you wake up being a software and services company." So a significant shift also in terms of how organizations see themselves. Clearly this has an impact on the wider ecosystem, including this distribution. A couple of things. So we spoke about transitions, but in some cases it can be a fairly gradual process. So the second platform business won't die off overnight. In fact, we believe that this market will decline by around 2.4% out to 2018. And the third platform, clearly that's where the growth is. In Europe, it will grow at around 9.5%. But it's all about getting that mix right between second and third platform capabilities. The vendor partners, that got mentioned earlier today as well. We are in a period where there will be significant shakeout, so it's important for all players in the ecosystem to select their vendor partners very, very wisely. And the same applies to their wider partnership, and I think Keith is going to touch on this later, in terms of partnerships amongst the partners. Professional services. At IDC, we see significant growth and interest in professional services. From a research point of view, it was one of our strongest areas over the last couple of years as organizations like your own continue to invest in professional services. And finally, social is going to change the way we communicate. I think all of us are tweeting away. I know that Keith is a significant tweeter. So that to us is going to have a significant impact on the market. So in terms of the discussions on the table, we would like you to look at the following questions, and then Keith will moderate the responses afterwards. So the first one is, where do you think the industry is today in terms of this transition from the third platform? To what extent are companies adopting cloud, mobility, big data, and social? What are the weaknesses and what are the strong points of distributors in a third platform world? The fourth bullet, where do professional services and or cloud services fit into the role of the distributor in the third platform? And finally, if you were to build a distribution company from the ground up today, how would that company look? So Keith, with that, I'd like to hand back. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So we've got 15 minutes now just to work at your tables, run through those questions, do as many as you can, please. We have lunch at 1:30, and maybe some people are hungry, so the better we get on with it, the more we'll be able to finish early and get to lunch. But at the end of the 15 minutes, I'd like the moderator from each table to just give a 5-minute summary or a 2-minute summary of what each table has said. And then we'll go through the other two topics in the same format. So over to you guys.
All right. Nowhere. We started from that discussion, from that corner of the discussion, but what we did is that we discussed the first question and then we went straight to the last. And the reason for that was because we felt the other questions would actually embed in the last one. And the likelihood of you getting to the last question is probably pretty low. We felt we could shine on that one. So let's talk briefly on the...
It's not a competition.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, we're contributing. We're contributing, we're collaborating. Keith, all good.
Keith, I thought there was something to win. Yeah.
That's the way EMC do it normally, but okay. The reflection that we had at the table and at Mixed Group here was that the third platform transition is really happening at different speeds. And yes, there's different buckets that are pulled together, that third platform logic, but actually they're evolving at different speeds. Where the example we had from a colleague from IBM was that analytics is really maybe less transformational today in terms of how it's developing, versus, for example, the speed that is in the mobile solution, mobile environment. We did discuss that and there's a bit of a personal observation here, but I was also in the group, that the effect of transitioning should be that we should be seeing payroll, time, discussions, focus shifting from what we do today to what we do tomorrow. And quite frankly, in a lot of those dialogues, both at a customer level and at a vendor level, those are still somewhat premature. I think there's a bit of a difference here that we do believe, at least I can see on the IBM side after the transaction that they did, because they have to go in that space. But very clearly, a lot of the partner discussions today are segmented into some of the third platform discussions, some of the cloud discussions, but typically not across the whole platform, and typically the core business takes a higher percentage of the time. So the view was there's a different segmented view in terms of transition, that we're still in early days, things are happening, nobody's taking a whole complete different holistic approach in that space was the view until now. And in terms of the disti perspective, if you were to build a distribution company bottom up, what would it look like? Also nice discussions there. starting with born in the cloud, forget everything you do today, which I obviously totally disagree with. I think there's great qualification from what we do today, but that's my aspect. But the discussion here was, yes, there is a move of a VAD environment that supports the third platform opportunity to be able to support a different level of business ecosystem, which we saw earlier on the earlier slide. There's a different degree of aggregation of solutions, aggregation of partners, and aggregation of skills required to actually support that business. A software integration highlighted as a key upside, taking a more active role in terms of the sales process itself was highlighted, and breaking vendor silos was highlighted. So being able to organize as a distributor around a vendor would not be appropriate for that model if we really want to be out there and drive a collaborative engagement around a more complete solution with different stakeholders in such a solution play. Anything big missing, guys?
No.
Yeah, fair enough?
Yep.
Thank Good, thank you.
Of my team, we also had quite good discussions. We did come a bit further down the questions. So, in terms of where we are on the transition towards the third platform, someone was saying we are 1/3 of the way, whatever that means. I guess the feedback is the same. We are not really there yet. We made a quick, interesting survey among the vendors at the table, and in fact, none of them are really tracking their revenue coming from the third platform today. So I guess the takeaway is that while the third platform is something we talk a lot about, the second platform is still very well alive, and the transition is not happening overnight. In terms of some of the weaknesses for distributors, difficult to find some. But we did talk about risk management because part of the third platform, part of cloud, is changing the way we look at risk management. When we talk about physical goods, it's very easy. You pay, you have a contract in place, there's a flow of contracts and money and so on. When it becomes a service or a cloud service, it's very different. So we do believe that we need to alter the way we look at risk management. Also, to Simon's point, and this is my own view as well, it's true organizationally, third platform is more about solution areas rather than silo areas. So by default, most distributors today do have kind of a siloed approach because of the level of technical expertise needed and so on, which could be a weakness in the transition towards the third world. Strengths, well, reach is still a big strength also in a cloud world or in a third platform world. The aggregation ability of distributions, bringing together multiple services in one overall service or solution catalog. Enablement, a lot of training, a lot of skills upgrades, a lot of new capabilities needed in the channel, and distribution can clearly play a role here in making sure the channel is adequately skilled to sell the new solutions. And localization, particularly in Europe, as we all know, is a big thing, and that is as relevant in a cloud-based world or in a third platform world as it is today. Cloud service, well, it's linked together. In terms of some other weaknesses, we put it under question 5, but there's clearly a need to change some business processes. There's clearly a need to change the way we compensate our people, the teams. I think that's about it. No?
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you.
Do we need the microphone, really?
No, not for you.
I've learned to project my voice. So the discussion at our table was actually that to a certain degree there is a lot more investment already done and there's a lot of moves already made, but in terms of the net result, that there's still obviously the balance is very much still on the second platform. But from a strengths perspective, clearly there was a breadth was also clearly outlined, and the ability from an enablement perspective of distribution channels to enable some of the second and the mid-tier partners to make that transformation to the next level. Part of our long-term pedigree has always been on that transformation and enablement into new areas. Also, the ability of distribution channels to be agile and respond more quickly to changes in the marketplace, and addressing that breadth was seen as a strength, and the ability to aggregate solutions and services. So that's pretty much in line with what everyone said. From a weaknesses perspective, we felt that there was a gap in terms of skills, and that will become a little bit more clear when we talk about, if you were building a company from scratch, what would you do? So skills were definitely a concern, and also the financial model that most distribution companies work to can often make the upfront investment needed in a major transition like this difficult to achieve while maintaining the business. And it's clear that managing that current market and managing that second platform, which is still the bulk, while making the investments needed to do it, a major transformation is something that's a really big challenge for all of us. How do you get that balance right? So that brought us very quickly, so rather than start at the back and work, otherwise we started at the front and then skipped the middle and went to the end. So if you were starting from scratch, we think we would very much focus much more in a vertical space, not necessarily in industry verticals, but driven by that thought process that this is a much more consumer market-driven trend, but you would build specialization at a vertical level. Much more consulting rather than pure technical in terms of the skills that you would need. Back to that point that we made, that a lot of the resources we have today are highly competent but not necessarily well positioned for consulting in that vertical space. The silos are there, but we also feel that there's a place for silos. They're just different kind of silos to the ones that we have today. So the silos that build up expertise, silo those specialist market area by market area, and then over time, as you've built up multiples, you then end up, of course, with a wider spread again, which is the way most of us started, by the way, when we started building product and vendor silos years ago. Also, from a marketing perspective, to really put some more focus, we felt that we would put some more focus on digital marketing and how to leverage that new generation and that new form of marketing more. We put much more investment in that area. Yeah, I think that more or less covers the breadth of what we talked about, but certainly there are some of the vendors who are further along in the transition and are measuring it differently and further ahead than others, and so that came out clearly in the conversation too.
Nathan, do you want a microphone?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Heavy investment in professional services and technical skill and stuff like that. You're not giving into Alessandro's ear. I think from our perspective, we feel that, it's depending, there's a difference of opinion, but I think we are early in the curve, but we passed our high. So we're early in that growth curve. Weaknesses, I think, of distributors in the third platform, I think, is our silos. I think one of our big challenges is the silo thinking, because it stops us from being agile. We're living in a very ambiguous world, and the one thing that we struggle with ambiguity is you've got to be agile to deal with ambiguity, because the market could move many ways. One of the other weaknesses, I think, is the legacy of the second platform, in terms of customer base, in terms of our product sets, in terms of our cultures. Our company cultures are very transactional, not solution focused. We think our compensation models are lagging. We've got to always build a new sales force, because the chances of your transactional sales force transitioning to solution focus is limited, and that's mostly most of the weaknesses. From a strength perspective, I think the key strength that we carry is our balance sheets from a distribution perspective. To build a business where you've got to have a heavy investment in professional services and technical skill and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to build that. Speaks to the last question as well, from scratch. So I think if you're going to build today a distribution-based services business or cloud services business from scratch, at best what you're going to have to be able to build is a low-margin aggregator, because you simply don't have the capital available to build it, because your return on investment is going to be longer term. The other challenge I think what we face is, and I think this is something that we've got to consider, is that the way we measure the legacy business is very different to the way we measure the new business. You've got a return on invested capital model sitting, if you listen to the EMEA guys, in the legacy business. And the third platform is about a discounted cash flow model. And how are we going to get those? So I think what it brings then is, if we are going to build this model, we're going to have to run both at the same time. And the speed at which we transition is going to be the critical portion. Because if you transition too fast, I think you're going to run into cash flow issues, and if you transition too slowly, you become irrelevant. And And that's the summary.
Thank you very much, Ed.